Hey guys, I'm JC and today we're playing Ratadrabik of Urborg. This is a legendary tribal deck that uses sack and reanimation effects to make multiple copies of legendary creatures. If this deck seems right up your alley, then make sure to stop by the channel where we have a deck tech as well as other gameplay videos showing how the deck was built as well as how it plays out. In addition, we also have a Discord group with a channel dedicated specifically to Ratadrabik, so if you'd like to discuss the deck further, make sure to check out the link in the description below. Let's show our opponents why just having one legendary creature is never enough. Alrighty guys, let's see who we're playing today. We have Glissa the Traitor, we have Etali Primal Conqueror, and we have General Marhadi Elsdragon. Alright, now let's take a look at our opening hand. We have 3 lands, we have a Blade of Souls, which isn't too bad. We have some really nice bombs in Junjis and Sheoldred, and a little bit of interaction as well. This is a little bit more of a riskier hand because I'd like to have usually a little bit of ramp, but we do have a sack outlet in Phyrexian Tower, so we can actually get this going if we draw relatively good, so a little risky, but I think we can actually keep this. The General starts us off by playing a tap land for turn, and it does have Hideaway 4, so they'll look at the top 4 cards of their library, exile 1 face down, and put the rest on the bottom of their library in a random order, and they can pay a red and tap it. They can play the exiled card without paying its mana cost if an opponent was dealt 7 or more damage this turn. And that is going to be it for them. We draw a Yawgmoth. Okay, well our turn 1's going to be pretty simple. We'll just start by playing our Marsh Flats. We'll crack it right away. We're going to find our Godless Shrine. We'll have it come into play tapped. And then we'll pass the turn. Glissa plays a land. And they cast a Wayfarer's Bauble. 2 tap and sack it. Search your library for a basic land card. Put that card on the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. And that's going to be it for them. Etali plays a land. And then they pass the turn. The General plays a tap land for turn. And then they pass the turn to us. And luckily we have a really good draw there in Goldmere. So let's play our Phyrexian Tower. And let's cast our Goldmere. So now this hand's starting to look a lot better. But that's going to be it for us. Glissa plays a land. And then they crack their Wayfarer's Bauble. They put a basic onto the battlefield tapped. And then they pass the turn. Etali plays a land. And they cast a Vexing Shusha. It can't be countered and you can pay a mana so target spell can't be countered. And that's going to be it for them. The General plays a land. Next, they cast an Elvish Berserker. When it becomes blocked, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each creature blocking it. And that's going to be it for them. We draw an Urborg. I think we'll start by playing our High Market. And then we'll cast our Commander. And that way we start to set ourselves up for a really strong Blade of Souls turn. We can possibly use interaction if we need to. And we can also get Yawgmoth down or Junji depending on what's happening on the board. But that's going to be it for our turn. Glissa plays a tap land for turn. And now they cast their commander, Glissa the Traitor. First strike Death Touch, whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you may return target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. And that's going to be it for them. Etali plays a land. They move to combat, but they decide not to attack. And then they pass the turn. It looks to be a little bit of a slower start for the Etali deck. They usually like to have ramp on turn 2. It is a very prototypical big mana deck. Now the General does play a land. Now they cast a Somberwald Alpha. Whenever a creature you control becomes blocked, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. And for 1 and a green, target creature you control gains trample until end of turn. Now they move to combat, but they pass through combat, and then they pass the turn to us. And we draw a Midnight Reaper. Okay, well we'll play our Urborg, and then I think we'll cast our Junji. Now we'll move to combat, we'll swing Ratadrabik towards the Etali player, because our commander does have Vigilance, so it's basically a free attack. Etali takes the damage, and then we're going to pass the turn. Glissa plays a land, a Wirewood Lodge, they can use it to untap an elf. Next, they cast a Bitter Blossom. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life and create a 1/1 Black Fairy Rogue creature token with flying. Now they move to combat. Glissa swings towards the Etali player. Once again, Etali takes the damage. And that is going to be it for the Glissa player. Etali plays a land. Next, they cast a Panharmonicon. If an artifact or creature entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. Going to be very powerful with their commander. Now they move to combat. The Shusha swings towards the Glissa player, because they've already shown they're not going to use it to block, so they may as well get some damage in. And we have a response from the Glissa player. They use their Wirewood Lodge to actually untap their commander. So they did bait the Etali player into losing their Vexing Shusha there, which is going to be pretty sad for them, and they do, they block it. The Vexing Shusha goes down, that triggers Glissa, and she's going to return the Wayfarer's Bauble to the Glissa player's hand. But that's going to be it for Etali. The General plays a land. And now they cast their commander, General Marhadi Elsdragon. Whenever a creature you control becomes blocked, it gets +3/+3 until end of turn for each creature blocking it. Next, they cast a Somberwald Vigilante. When Somberwald Vigilante becomes blocked by a creature, it deals 1 damage to that creature. Now they move to combat. The Elvish Berserker comes towards us. We're just going to take the damage. And then they pass the turn to us. And we draw a Kambal. Now, just something I want to note for you guys, for anyone that's actually watched the deck tech for Ratadrabik, if you're wondering why Blade of Souls is here when it isn't actually in the deck tech or the list itself, it's because there are some cards on Magic Online that aren't available, so if they aren't, I usually substitute it for either cards on the considered list or just ones that I like to try out. So normally this would actually be Saw in Half, which does a very similar job to Blade of Souls. But speaking of Blade of Souls, I think now is the time that we actually get it down. So let's start by casting it. Now we use Phyrexian Tower to sacrifice our Goldmere. Then we'll move to equip the Blade of Souls to our Junji. Now we'll move to combat. We'll send Junji towards the Glissa player and Ratadrabik towards Etali. That's going to trigger Myriad. We're going to choose to keep our original. That's going to trigger our commander twice as well as Junji. So we're actually going to make our opponents discard cards here. We're going to strip their hand down, which is going to make our game plan a lot easier to go through. And because Junji can actually reanimate creatures from anyone's graveyard, we do want to pay attention to what actually hits there. So an Ulvermold Hydra hits the graveyard, just some lands, just a few more lands and artifacts. Now our damage goes through. And after that pretty explosive turn, I think we can just pass it over to our opponents. On Glissa's upkeep, Bitter Blossom triggers, so they'll lose a life and make a 1/1 Fairy Rogue. Next, they cast a Viridian Longbow. Equip creature has tap. This creature deals 1 damage to any target. Nice piece of removal in that deck. Now they equip the Longbow to their commander. And no doubt that's probably going to try to take out Ratadrabik, because they will have enough mana to be able to pay the ward cost. But they do move to combat first. They decide to actually pass through combat. And then they're going to pass the turn over. Etali plays a land. Next, they cast a Jeweled Lotus. Sack it, add 3 mana of any one color. Spend this mana only to cast your commander. Well, the last card they kept in hand was certainly a good one. And they are going to be able to get their commander down now with a Panharmonicon. So this game definitely isn't over yet, that's for sure. They crack the Lotus. And now we see their commander Etali, Primal Conqueror, hit the board. It has Trample. When it ETBs, each player exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile a non-land card. You may cast any number of spells from among the non-land cards exiled this way without paying their mana cost. And for 9 and a Phyrexian mana, you can transform Etali. So now they get 2 triggers when it ETBs. Let's see what they get off the first hit. An Oracle of Moldiah, an Ashnod's Altar from us. Also a Tree Shaker Chimera. And finally a 3 Visits. Not bad hits at all. And it looks like the top card of their library is also a Dockside Extortionist. That's a pretty scary card there. Alright, second round with Etali. One we know they get is their Dockside Extortionist. The next one is a Pride of Lions. And from us, they get a Braids Arisen Nightmare. And finally, they get a Steel Hellkite from the Glissa player. So it went from us being the archenemy to Etali. Well, I guess we're still pretty scary, but Etali's certainly stepping up their game, that's for sure. Hopefully that takes a little bit of attention off of us. Now, unfortunately, Dockside normally wouldn't be too crazy in this situation, but because of Panharmonicon, they are going to make quite a decent amount of mana here. Very lucky we stripped their hand when we did. And also lucky they don't have a bounce effect to get Etali back to their hand, at least at the moment. They do play a land for turn, and then off the top of their library is an Apex Devastator. Well, we've definitely got to try to kill the Etali player as quickly as possible. Otherwise, we probably just can't keep up with the amount of advantage they've got going on. Now they move to their end step. Our Braids triggers for them. And they actually decide to sacrifice an artifact. Well, we're definitely not going to sacrifice our Blade of Souls, so we'll say no to that. That will allow them to draw a decent number of cards here. They might even get 3. And they do. The Glissa player doesn't sacrifice their Viridian Longbow. And that is going to be it for their massive turn. The General plays a land. Now they move to combat. The General swings towards the Etali player. And so does the Elvish Berserker. It's a little bit of a dangerous decision there because if Etali decides to block with their commander, they do have the ability to easily recast it again. Maybe the General is actually doing that on purpose because they feel like we're still the threat and they need the help to take us out. But instead they decide to block the General with the Oracle of Moldiah. That triggers Somberwald Alpha as well as the General. In response, the General activates their Somberwald Alpha. So the target creature gains Trample until end of turn. Damage goes through and the Oracle of Moldiah dies. Now that also triggers Glissa the Traitor. They decide to return their Wayfarer's Bauble. That also knocks the Etali player down to 20. And now they activate their Spine Rock Knoll. They're going to be able to cast this spell for free. Let's see what they put under there. It looks like they got the Heat of Battle. Whenever a creature blocks, Heat of Battle deals 1 damage to that creature's controller. Definitely not the worst that could be, that's for sure. And that is going to be it for their turn. But on the General's end step, Glissa activates their commander, trying to take Ratadrabik out. Now that does trigger Ward 2. And they do pay for it. So now Ratadrabik will go down. We're not going to return him to the command zone here because luckily Junji can get it right back. Now that also triggers Glissa and they return their Triangle of War to their hand. Now we can move to our turn. And we draw our Ganjo, Seat of the Empire. Alright, well let's play that land. Next we'll move to combat. We'll send our Junji towards the Glissa player. That's going to trigger Myriad. We're going to keep the original. That'll give us 2 Junji triggers and Glissa will get 2 triggers herself. Our first trigger we're going to reanimate Ratadrabik. And our second, we're going to make each opponent discard 2 cards and lose 2 life. Our commander comes back to the battlefield. Glissa just decides to take the damage. Now we're going to sacrifice one of our Junji tokens. And we're going to reanimate the Elvenwald Hydra. That'll also trigger Glissa and they get back their Wayfarer's Bauble. And it looks like we have the General Scoop there, so they've definitely seen enough. They've seen the power of Junji and they don't like what they see. So now we only have 2 opponents left, which definitely does make our job a lot easier. Now we get the Hydra, and when it ETBs, we get to search our library for any land and put it onto the battlefield tapped. And we'll get ourselves a Nykthos Shrine to Nyx, because that's going to help us generate a lot of mana, especially with all the black pips we have on board at the moment. After that, we're going to cast Yawgmoth, just so we have a sack outlet on board. And then from here, we're just going to pass the turn. On Glissa's upkeep, Bitter Blossom triggers, so they lose a life and make another fairy. Next, they cast a Sakura Tribe Elder, sack it, search your library for a basic land card, put that card onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. Now they move to combat, but they decide to pass through combat. Next, they recast their Wayfarer's Bauble, and then they pass the turn. And what I've also done is I've put a stop in the Etali player's draw step, so now in response I'm going to use Yawgmoth. I'm going to sacrifice our Junji token. We'll just target one of the Fairy Rogues with the -1/-1 counter. Now we're going to make the Etali player discard those 2 cards. That'll also trigger Glissa, which returns the Triangle of War. And that actually causes the Etali player to scoop. Alright guys, well now we've got 1 player left. It looks like it's Orzhov versus Golgari. And we are both recursion decks, so let's see who comes out on top here. But it looks like the Glissa player's seen enough as well, and they've decided to scoop it up. Alright guys, well that is the game done. Let's go to the review and discuss what happened.
So in this game we had a beautiful curve play out. Getting that turn 2 dork into our commander, then Junji, and finally the Blade of Selves equipped to Junji was what gave us the powerful turns that followed. Although the Glissa player did present us with some strong interaction, and the Etali player certainly popped off on their turn, we got to see the true power of what Junji can do with Ratadrabik. Being able to strip our opponent's hands, as well as reanimate any creature from anyone's graveyard, was just too much value to overcome turn after turn, and that's what forced our opponents to concede. Well, that's it for today's video. Although the Ratadrabik deck tech was only recently updated, with the Lord of the Rings set fast approaching and focused on legendary creatures, we should be able to add some powerful new legendaries to Ratadrabik's army soon, so make sure to keep your eyes posted. But until then, take care guys.